have you ever stopped to think about who actually owns a meme or an AI-generated image or, that catchy melody from a hit song that gets stuck in your head? The answer to all of that is tied up in this really fascinating concept that pretty much shapes our entire digital world: intellectual property. It's all about ownership, but for things you can't physically hold.
And right away, that's the central puzzle, isn't it? I mean, you can't exactly put a padlock on a story, or build a fence around an invention, or lock a brand name in a safe. So how in the world can you legally own it? And this isn't some newfangled internet problem. Oh no, this is a question philosophers and lawmakers have been wrestling with for centuries.
Well, a long time ago, the philosopher John Locke came up with this really powerful idea. He basically said that when you mix your labor with something, it becomes yours. This slide kind of extends that logic from the physical world into the world of ideas. So on the left, you've got a craftsman who takes raw ore and through their labor, their work, turns it into a belt buckle. On the right, you have a writer who takes the raw material of language and forges it into a play. See the parallel? In both cases, it's the labor that creates the value, and you could argue, the ownership.
Okay, so that brings us to the modern official definition. The World Intellectual Property Organization calls it these creations of the mind. And you have to understand this is a huge umbrella term. It covers pretty much everything from the design of the smartphone in your pocket to the little jingle in a car commercial. But here's the catch. There's this fundamental trade-off at the heart of it all. See, society as a whole benefits when ideas are shared and built upon. But creators, they need a good reason to pour their time, money, and energy into making new things. The solution is a kind of legal bargain. The law gives creators a temporary monopoly on their work, and in exchange for that protection, the work eventually enters the public domain for everyone to use. Think of it like a timed exclusive.
So, how does this projection actually work in the real world? Let's open up the IP toolbox and take a look at the 4 main tools that creators and companies use to lock down their intangible creations. Each tool is designed for a very different job. If you're an app developer, you're probably living in the world of patents. But if you're a musician, it's all about copyright. First up, we've got the trade secret. The classic example here is the secret formula for Coca-Cola. Its entire value comes from the fact that it's, a secret. This kind of protection can last forever, but, and this is a big but, there's a catch. If someone can buy your product, take it apart, and figure out how it works, a process called reverse engineering, that's totally legal. The secret's out. Next in the toolbox is the trademark. This is all about brand identity. Think the Nike swoosh or the Apple logo. It's basically a guarantee that says, this product came from us. A trademark can last forever, unless it becomes a generic word for something. This actually happened with words like escalator and aspirin. It's the whole reason Google's lawyers will gently remind you that you search for things online, not that you Google them. They're fighting to protect their brand.
Then there's the patent. This one is for new inventions, and the deal is pretty straightforward. You have to publish a super detailed blueprint explaining exactly how your invention works for the whole world to see. In exchange for that transparency, the government gives you a 20-year monopoly. After those 20 years are up, that blueprint is fair game for anybody to use.
And finally, we have copyright. Now, this is the big one. This is the one we all interact with every single day. It automatically protects original creative works. We're talking books, music, movies, photos, even software code. And it gives the creator the ultimate say over who gets to copy and share it. And believe me, that control is worth a lot of money. Just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, the industries that really rely on copyright, publishing, movies, music, software, they contribute over $900 billion a year to the US economy alone. This is very, very big business.
So what does that control actually mean? What do you get with a copyright? Well, you get a whole bundle of exclusive rights. You and you alone get to decide who can make copies, who can sell them, who can perform or display your work in public, or even who gets to make something new based on your work, like turning a book into a movie.
Now, for a really long time, this system of control worked pretty well, mainly because it was tied to physical objects. But then, digital technology came along and created what's now called the perfect copy problem. And honestly, it changed everything.
Let's just take a quick trip back in time. If you ever made a mixtape on a cassette tape, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A copy of a copy always sounded worse. Every time you recorded it, you added a new layer of hiss and distortion. This generational loss, as it's called, was kind of a natural, built-in barrier to mass copying.
Digital files just blew that whole equation out of the water. See, a digital copy isn't a degraded version of the original.
It is a perfect, bit-for-bit, identical clone. And you can make 1,000,000 of those clones just as easily as you can make one. All of a sudden, those physical barriers to copying, they just vanished. But okay, even in the early days of the internet, there was still a roadblock. Our internet connections are built for consuming stuff, not for sharing it. We could download things relatively quickly, but uploading? That was painfully slow. This imbalance made sharing a really huge file, like a movie, basically impossible for most people.
And then, this technology called BitTorrent came along with an absolutely ingenious solution. Instead of trying to download one giant file from one person with a slow upload speed, BitTorrent breaks the file up into thousands of tiny little puzzle pieces. Then, your computer downloads all those different pieces from hundreds of different people at the same time. It completely shattered the bottleneck and made sharing massive files incredibly easy.
Okay, so with copying now basically effortless, the legal system had to scramble to adapt. And that brings us to a really critical and often pretty confusing concept that was designed to try and bring some balance back: fair use. The big question here is, when is it actually okay to use copyrighted material without asking for permission? So fair use is this legal idea that says, look, in certain situations, it's okay to reproduce a copyrighted work. We're talking about things like criticism, commentary, news reporting, or teaching. It's the whole reason a film critic can show clips from a movie in their review without getting a lawsuit in the mail.
But figuring out if something is fair use isn't a simple checklist. It's really a balancing act. Courts have to weigh these 4 factors. First, what's the purpose of your use? Is it commercial, or is it educational and transformative? Second, what's the nature of the original work? Third, how much of it did you copy? Was it just a tiny clip or the whole thing? And finally, and this one's huge, what's the effect on the market? Does your copy stop people from buying the original? It's a really flexible but very, very tricky legal test.
This constant tug of war between the rights of creators and public access led some people to start questioning the entire system. And this brings us to our final section, the open source movement, which came along and proposed a radically different way of thinking about all of this.
The open source movement was really born out of frustration. Its pioneers started arguing that strict software copyright wasn't helping innovation anymore. It was actually strangling it. They believed that locking down code and ideas went against the very collaborative spirit you need for technology to move forward.
This table really helps highlight the key differences, especially in the software world. So a copyright protects the literal code that you write. It's pretty much automatic and doesn't cost anything. A patent, on the other hand, protects the idea or the process behind the code, and that is very expensive and difficult to get. But the really crucial difference? Copyright allows for reverse engineering, while a patent strictly forbids it. The open source world, for the most part, completely rejects that restrictive patent approach.
And that brings us right back to the central question for our digital age. As technology makes sharing ideas and art totally frictionless, where do we draw the line? Should we prioritize the rights of creators to make sure they have a reason to create new things? Or should we prioritize public access to help build our shared culture and spark new innovations? Honestly, there is no easy answer, but how we decide to solve that puzzle will define the future of creativity.